And welcome to round 4 of the Harry Potter Trading Card Game Revival February 2024 tournament. We have Jan versus Carter in this matchup. So on the bottom we have Carter playing Fred and George Weasley, which is essentially a way to cheat adventures into play to make them cheaper, as well as to replace his own adventures if his opponent gets too close to solving them or something else. And then up top we have Jan, who, if I recall correctly, is doing a McGonagall creature deck. So good luck to both players, and we shall see what happens. So Carter starts by playing Locked In, and normally adventures require 2 actions to play, but Fred and George Weasley allow you to use 1 action instead of 2. So this allows Carter to play Locked In, which will reduce his opponent's number of actions every turn, while also being allowed to play a lesson for action 2, and that will allow him to start getting lessons into play so that he can play creatures. Carter's essentially going to try to reduce what his opponent can do while putting creatures on the board to just pressure his opponent with a lot of damage every turn. So it's a control-y, damagey deck, similar to what we've seen from some other players in this tournament. Carter is just using adventures as opposed to lesson removal, such as Defendo or whatnot. And it looks like Jan is just going to go through and solve the adventure. So after solving the adventure, Jan just plays a Charms lesson. Even though the adventure is solved, Jan still only gets 1 action for their turn. They do not get the action back once it has been determined that they only get 1 at the beginning of their turn. So Carter, before turn, fetches a Transfiguration lesson from his deck, and then for the 2 actions of his turn is going to play a Pep Talk and another Fetch lesson. Pep Talk is going to require Jan to, for his first action, draw a card from deck unless they reveal a card with printed power cost 8 or more from their hand. Luckily, we see that Jan does have that in Dobby's help, so hopefully Pep Talk will be solved fairly quickly, and then Jan won't have to draw for action 1 and can just do whatever they want to do for their turn. So they do show Dobby's help from their hand. That will resolve Pep Talk, and then they can just take their turn and use their actions however they want to. So they're going to actually just play a Grip Hook from their hand, so use 2 actions to play a character card, and Grip Hook will essentially allow Jan once per game to make their opponent discard their hand and then draw that many cards. We see Dobby's help up in his hand, so essentially Jan's going to try to play Dobby's help, make Carter draw 10 cards, and then use Grip Hook to make Carter draw another 10 cards after discarding their hand. So Carter just plays 2 lessons here, a creature and a Transfiguration lesson. It is odd that he didn't play some type of adventure. I wonder if there just isn't an adventure in their hand, or there isn't one that works really well in this situation. If Carter only has Pep Talk, that's not really going to do anything. So up in Jan's hand, oh, that's right, Jan is not playing a creature deck. Jan is actually playing a VTJ combo deck, and we see VTJ in his hand right now. So ideally, Jan would want to play a Dobby's help, do 10, make their opponent draw 10 cards, and then play VTJ and have their opponent draw double the number of cards in their hand. Not a ton of lessons to get up to that 9 and 10 power, but on the right track, at least having the pieces. We'll see if he can get the lessons that they need. Carter, again, just plays 2 lessons, doesn't play any adventures. He must really not have adventures in his hand. Otherwise, he's usually throwing down adventure and a lesson at the same time to advance his own board state with a lesson, but also restrict his opponents with the adventure. So it's very strange that he's not playing an adventure for one of the actions on his turn. So Jan is going to play I Solemnly Swear, so they need to discard 3 cards from their hand, and then they can go fetch some lessons from their deck and put some lessons into play. This is a way for Jan just to get up to that high lesson count. They will get 2 lessons of any type, so could go get 2 advanced lessons, could go get 2 basic lessons, whatever they really want to do. And you do see Jan discarding Venomous Tentacular Juice, so we had seen in an earlier game that Jan also plays 3 turns. It's a 12 cost card, but 3 turns would essentially let Jan replay VTJ from their discard pile, which means they don't need to keep it in their hand. So Jan is just like, I have this 1 copy, I don't really care if it goes away because I can just replay it with 3 turns, and we do see 3 turns in their hand, so they have the pieces they need. Again, it's just getting up to that lesson count. And then we see Carter again, just playing 2 lessons, now up to 8 power. This is a little strange. I wasn't expecting so many lessons from Carter. Their hand is only 2 cards, so it is very small at this point, and maybe they really just don't have the adventures. So we see Jan just draw 3 cards total for their turn, using 2 actions to draw cards, probably looking for something to either ramp a little bit, or just looking for different types of lessons than they have, not really sure. So Carter is going to play a Sandstone Gargoyle, which is going to do extra damage because his opponent has no creatures, and then plays Defindo. So Defindo gets rid of Grip Hook, so that must have been Carter's plan, get up to enough power so that he can play Defindo and get rid of the problem pieces on board that Jan could really use to make Carter draw a lot of cards. And we see Jan drew a Dragon Heart Wand. That is an awesome card to draw. This is essentially going to be 1 action that's going to give him 3 power, which is going to bring him up to 9 power, and that allows him to play Invisible Ink and choose 2 of his opponent's lessons in play and discard them. Invisible Ink has been all over this tournament. It's a really effective lesson destruction card, and lessons are how you play most of the cards in this game, so if you can get rid of a bunch of lessons, you're really stopping your opponent from doing their thing. Hopefully Carter is going to draw into some adventures here and make use of his starting character, and if he can play some more adventures, the number of lessons doesn't really matter. So Carter is now going to play Letters from No One. This is a really great move because Letters from No One is just going to restrict what Jan can do. So Jan's not going to be able to do anything except play lessons, which doesn't really mind doing right now for the 2 in their hand. But to solve Letters from No One, either Jan has to discard 5 cards or use his starter. And I'm not sure if this is the adventure that he wants to use the starter on, but we shall see what they decide to do. And they do use their starter, Professor McGonagall, to get rid of the adventure. That allows Jan to play whatever they want to, and they're going to play a Scribbler choosing the creature and the Transfiguration lesson. So this is an interesting spot for Carter to be in because the Transfiguration is his only power of that particular type, but the Gargoyle is doing the repeated damage. And he is getting a slight edge over Jan at this point by about 9 cards in their deck. But that Gargoyle is just needed to keep that up. Carter decides to keep the Transfiguration lesson and discard the Gargoyle. We'll see what he has in his hand. And there's the Locked In. So this is the very traditional play of 1 action for the adventure, 1 action for the Transfiguration lesson. And this is really Carter's game plan: adventure, lesson, adventure, creature, or something along those lines. So action 1, which is the only action Jan has, they're going to draw a card, and then it looks like they're going to solve Locked In. So they're discarding 4 cards from their hand, cards that they really don't need at this moment. And then their reward is they can draw 2 cards if they want to, and they do, and they draw into a Scribblefors and 3 turns. 3 turns is one of the cards that is really going to help Jan's strategy, so that is fantastic to see. But then they only got the 1 action for the turn, so they pass turn to Carter. So Jan is going to play Scribblifores, choosing Locked In and the Transfiguration lesson. Carter decides this time to discard the lesson and then bounce the adventure back to hand. So Carter is going to play Locked In and then play Baby Acromantula. We've seen Baby in the previous rounds. Essentially, it allows you to go search for more of them from your deck and add it to your hand. So this allows Carter to get more creatures to make sure that there is consistent damage, while also thinning his deck a little bit to really draw the adventures that he wants to draw and not waste draws on creatures. So Jan is in an interesting position. They have Wand Shop in hand, which would double the amount of Charms lesson power that they have in play. That is fantastic because then Jan would be up to that, to be way over 12 power, needed to play 3 turns. But the issue here is that if Jan does a Wand Shop and then a Dobby's Help, then Carter now has 14 cards in his hand to do a lot with. And Jan also only has 1 action from Locked In, so he can even play both cards in the same turn. Even during a single turn, Jan's not going to be able to combo off and do a Dobby's Help and do a 3 turns to replay VTJ. Jan really needs to do something about this Locked In, or this reduction on action is just not going to let his combos go off. So we see Carter play Stairs into Slides. This is a new Transfiguration card that allows Carter to choose a non-lesson card that their opponent played last turn and then discard it. That's a great move to get rid of Wand Shop. It's narrow in terms of only being able to hit whatever was played last turn, but getting rid of that Wand Shop is exactly what Carter wants to do, just to make sure that Jan doesn't have all the power without playing more cards. So we see Carter plays another Baby Acromantula, searches their deck for 1, puts it into their hand, and then immediately puts it into play for action 2, and then uses that when you play effect of the baby to go search for a 4th one from their deck. So that is now all 4 of the babies from Carter's deck. He's now going to be doing a consistent 3 damage a turn. While that may not seem like a lot, it does add up when your deck is your life. So this is a great spot for Carter to be in. He has the reduced number of actions from Locked In toward his opponent. He has the repeated damage with the babies. Overall, this is a great space for Carter to be in. Jan really needs to do something about this Locked In and decide, do I want to discard 4 cards and get 2 actions next turn? Is Carter going to have another adventure in play to just lock me out again? What is going to happen? And Jan goes for playing the Wand Shop, which will again double the amount of Charms lesson power that they have in play. And then it looks like Jan is going to go ahead and solve Locked In. Even though they may not want to discard 4 cards from their hand, this may just be a move that they need to do, mainly because they need to have 2 actions in 1 turn. 2 actions in 1 turn at this point would just about, if not kill Carter. So this is what we want to do. Hopefully Carter doesn't have another action reducing adventure in their hand. If they do, Jan is going to be stuck again. So we'll see what Carter plays. And he plays a Letters from No One, and this means that Jan can't play any cards except for lessons. This is really going to hurt Jan. They want to keep at least 2 of the cards in their hand, and to solve Letters, they have to discard 5 cards from their hand. So this is just a difficult position to be in. Jan could draw, use an action to draw, and then solve Letters, but then they only have 1 action left, and that's not really going to help them get to where they need to be. It looks like Jan is just going to draw for both actions, get a lot of cards in their hand, and then pass turn, take 3 damage from Carter's creatures, and Jan is getting dangerously low to decking out. They have 12 cards left in their deck. So Carter plays a Madame Pomfrey. This is a character that once per game allows you to essentially heal yourself for 12 cards, which is most of the cards in Carter's discard pile. All of them but one, I think. And I'm assuming he's going to take all of them except for that lesson. Yep, takes all of them except for that fetch lesson. And then that fetch lesson will go back into the discard pile. Pomfrey was a great move here. Even if Carter draws 10 from Dobby's help, he's now at 15 cards. And then a VTJ would make him draw 30, which I think would leave him with like 3 cards left in deck. So Jan goes with the Scribbler Force and the Invisible Ink. Oh, nope. Okay. So Jan is going to solve Letters from No One. So they really just need to be able to play cards that are not lessons. So they discard 5 cards. We'll see if Jan draws 2 for the reward from Letters from No One. And they do take the prize from that. So they draw 2 cards, an Invisible Ink and a Transfiguration Lesson. And let's see if Jan does Dobby's help into 3 turns. So Jan plays Invisible Ink, discarding 2 of Carter's lessons, including the only Transfiguration lesson. Carter can still rely on the adventures, so this may not be too backbreaking. And then it looks like Jan is going to play a 3 turns to replay a grip hook from their discard pile. Okay, so if Jan can survive until his next turn, I believe between playing Dobby's help 3 turns and then grip hooking Carter, that is going to be game. We'll see if Carter can do anything to do the rest of the 9 damage needed. Jan should take 3 from the Baby Acromantula here. Yep, so Jan is down to 6 cards in deck. They'll draw 1 for turn. Hagrid's help is probably going to win Carter this game. It's going to only give Jan 1 action, and that is not going to be enough. And Carter played another Baby Acromantula as well, so that is going to be 4 damage. This could be game unless Jan can Scribbler Force the Hagrid and then survive another turn, but I'm not sure how likely that is to be. And I think that that is game. Carter won. I believe Jan was not able to come out of that. That Hagrid needs help. Reducing Jan to 1 action really hurt. They really needed to have 2 actions on that last turn. They could have Dobby's helped to make Carter draw and have 14 cards in hand. Venomous Tentacular Juice to make Carter draw another 28. And then at that point, activate Grip Hook, and Carter would have drawn over 30 cards probably, and that would have decked out Carter. So Jan was literally 1 action away from winning and beating Carter. That was a very close, very good game. Both players played very well. You saw Carter's deck work really well by playing Adventure, playing a Lesson, playing an Adventure, playing a Creature, and that's really what Fred and George Weasley want to do. Control the opponent through reducing the action cost of Adventures and then putting pressure on with Creatures. That worked out very, very well. Both players now get to sideboard up to 15 cards. We'll see if Jan can put in some answers for the Adventures and for the Creatures. And then we'll see what Carter does to help combat the large number of spells that Jan is trying to play. And welcome back. So both players have sideboarded if they do want to sideboard. And it looks like I think Jan is going to end up going first because they lost the first game. So we don't see anything new in Jan's opening hand, but that does not mean that they did not sideboard anything in the rest of their deck. So Jan opens with 2 lessons, which is exactly what they want to do, while Carter opens with a Locked In and a Transfiguration lesson, which is exactly what he wants to do. So both players have kind of gotten off to a turn 1 start that is very akin to what their deck wants and their deck's game plan. So this is a great start by both players. Locked In is going to be really difficult for Jan. Just getting hit so early with a card that's going to make him discard cards from their hand is just going to be a little backbreaking at this point, especially with no lessons in their hand. Maybe drawing 2 cards from locked in would help, but we'll see. So Jan is going to play Picking on Neville on the locked in. So this allows him to get around the locked in. It is using the 1 action of their turn to get rid of locked in, which kind of sucks. And Carter just comes back on his turn and plays a second locked in, and then plays a Sandstone Gargoyle. Again, this will do a little bit of extra damage every turn because Jan doesn't have any creatures in play. So it looks like Jan is going to discard some cards to solve locked in, really just to get out from being stuck under this 1 less action trap. Probably a good move, and then also draw some cards to replace some of those that they discarded. And it does get 2 lessons into their hand, which is great. So that's going to help them start getting up to that power. Right now, just being at 4 power is not what Jan wants. So a slight technical difficulty. It looks like the program is not allowing the players to move those middle 3 cards out. So we'll just play with those sitting there. So Jan plays a Flue Powder, which then allows him to go search his deck for a Wand Shop. So Wand Shop is going to get him up to, at this point, 7 power total, doubling the number of Charms power. So that's a decent move. Carter plays a Hager Needs Help to reduce some of their opponent's actions, and also plays a Transfiguration Lesson. So that is the very traditional move that Carter wants to do during their turn. It looks like Jan is going to take 8 damage, resolving Hager Needs Help, and then draws 3 cards in order to for the reward for Hager Needs Help. So this will allow Jan to have 2 actions on their next turn, which is the normal amount. And then for their only action for this turn, they play a Wand Shop, passes it to Carter, takes 3 damage from the Sandstone Gargoyle, and now we'll see what Carter does. So Carter plays an Empty Classroom. So this is a Transfiguration location that will essentially require Jan to have 3 more power to play whatever location he wants to play. So this is a great way to lock Wand Shop out for a little bit. So Carter is going to play an Empty Classroom, discarding the Wand Shop, and then play a Baby Acromantula, search their deck for a second one, and add that one to their hand. So between the Baby Acromantula and the Sandstone Gargoyle, there's a lot of pressure now on Jan to do something about these creatures in play, especially being locked out of power because of this Empty Classroom. So Jan is now taking 4 damage a turn between the Gargoyle and the Baby Acromantula. Carter plays a Hager Needs Help, another card to just lock Jan out of the 2 actions and reducing him to 1. Kind of a very difficult position for Jan to be in. Carter plays another baby, searching for another baby. This is really turning into Carter's game, having the control, having the repeated damage. This is definitely turning into an uphill battle. So Jan plays I Solemnly Swear. They will discard 3 cards from their hand, and then you'll get to put 2 lessons from their deck into play. This is also a way to get 2 lessons into play for 1 action. There are not many cards that will actually do that in this game. Most of the cards that will give you 2 power for 1 action are Hermione, one of her versions, or an item that will provide 2 power. So this may be the best way for Jan to get more power sooner. And that is game. So it looks like Jan concedes. That was a great game by both players. Carter's control just came down in the end, and Jan just could not overcome it. Hopefully, we'll get to see Jan's BTJ combo one more time before the end of this tournament. Thank you all for watching, and good luck to both players.